The welding torch in Jace's hand spat a stream of blue-white plasma, hissing like a cornered viper against the scorched hull of the freighter. Sparks cascaded down the front of his heavy exosuit, bouncing harmlessly off the reinforced leather and vanishing into the gloom of the hangar bay. The air here tasted of recycled oxygen, burnt ozone, and the copper tang of hydraulic fluid that had been leaking for 6 months. Jace killed the torch. The silence that rushed back in was heavy, punctuated only by the distant rhythmic thud of the station's atmospheric stabilizers fighting a losing battle against entropy. He pushed his goggles up into his sweaty, matted hair and looked around. Hangar Bay 4 was a graveyard of ambition. Cables hung from the ceiling like disemboweled intestines, dripping coolant onto the great floor. Holographic warning signs flickered in and out of existence, their batteries dying, flashing the word caution in 3 galactic languages before dissolving into static. He wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag that was filthier than the hands themselves and walked to the massive magnetic shield that separated his shop from the void. Outside, the universe mocked him. Below the rotting orbit of the salvage station lay the imperial capital, Ethelgard. It was a sphere of impossible perfection, wrapped in orbital rings of spun gold and silver light. The cities down there did not just glow, they breathed. Great spires of crystalline architecture pierced the clouds, connected by ribbons of traffic that looked like flowing mercury. It was a world of gods and monsters, where death was an inconvenience for the poor and a myth for the rich. Jace leaned his forehead against the cold, reinforced glass. A sharp pain spiked behind his eyes, followed by the familiar disjointed slide of memory. Static, then fire. He was in the cockpit of the Strike Viper. The collision alarms were screaming, a sound that vibrated in his teeth. The sky above the refugee colony was black with smoke. He pulled back on the stick, but the hydraulics were dead. "Eject," a voice screamed in his headset. "Jace, eject." He saw the ground rushing up. He saw the transport ship full of families heavy and slow in the atmosphere. He saw the enemy fighter lock on. His hand froze on the lever. 1 second, 2 seconds, too late. The transport disintegrated in a bloom of silent white light. Jace gasped, pulling back from the hangar window, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He blinked the sweat from his eyes, forcing the phantom image of the burning ship back into the locked vault of his mind. 3 years. It had been 3 years since the court-martial, since they stripped his rank, since he ended up here, tightening bolts on garbage scows for captains who paid in credits that barely cleared the debt interest. He turned back to the freighter. It was an ugly, blocky hauler, but the captain had promised a bonus if the hyperdrive stabilizers were calibrated by 0600 hours. A low vibration ran through the deck plates. It was not the rhythmic shudder of the stabilizers. This was deeper, a subsonic hum that traveled up through the soles of his boots and rattled his teeth. Jace frowned. He grabbed a heavy wrench, his knuckles white. Outside the magnetic field, the star field distorted. It was not the clumsy tear of a commercial jump drive. This was elegant, terrifying physics. Space did not just fold, it unraveled. An aurora of warped light, violet and bruised gold, rippled across the vacuum, an imperial worm gate. Jace squinted against the glare. Those gates were reserved for the high nobility, capable of folding light years into centimeters. It opened silently, a mouth in the fabric of reality, and from it emerged a silhouette that made the surrounding stars look dull. It was a shuttle, but calling it a shuttle was like calling a diamond a rock. It was sleek, shaped like a teardrop of polished obsidian, seemingly seamless. There were no visible thrusters, no weapon ports, just a smooth, dark surface engraved with glowing alien runes that pulsed with a heartbeat of their own. Rich people magic. Jace thought, spitting on the deck. The vessel glided toward the salvage station. It should not have been coming here. This sector was for the desperate and the forgotten. But the Obsidian ship moved with predatory purpose, ignoring the docking beacons of the main commercial hub and banking sharply toward the derelict sector. Toward Hangar Bay 4, Jace's datapad chirped on his workbench. He ignored it. It chirped again, an urgent, piercing trill. He walked over and looked at the screen. Override authorized. Security level. Apex. Clearance granted. The massive blast doors of his hangar, which usually took 5 minutes and a kick to the control panel to open, groaned and began to retract with a smoothness he had never seen. The atmospheric shields shimmered, adjusting their frequency to welcome the intruder. "What in the hell?" Jace muttered. The Obsidian ship drifted through the magnetic field, displacing the stagnant air of the hangar. It was silent. No roar of engines, just the displacement of air and the faint smell of electric storms, ozone and petrichor that suddenly flooded the bay. It extended landing gear that looked like the talons of a bird of prey, touching down on the grease-stained deck with barely a sound. The ship was massive, filling the space, its black hull reflecting the sparks of Jace's unfinished welding job. Jace stood his ground, gripping the wrench. He was not a soldier anymore, but the instinct to hold a weapon when faced with the unknown never left. A seam appeared in the smooth black flank of the ship. A ramp descended, hissing as it touched the dirty floor. White mist curled out from the interior, chilled and sterile. And then she stepped out. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with a physique that was terrifyingly symmetrical. She wore a high-collared coat of dark weave that seemed to absorb the light around her, structured with sharp, militaristic shoulders but flowing like water at the hem. But it was her face that made Jace's breath catch in his throat. Her skin was luminous, possessing a faint, inner pearlescence that made her look like she was lit by a moon trapped beneath her dermis. Her cheekbones were high, sharp enough to cut glass, framing eyes that were large and completely devoid of whites. They were shifting pools of iridescent violet and blue, swirling like nebulas in motion. On her brow sat a neural tiara, a delicate lattice of silver metal that hummed with a frequency on the edge of hearing, connecting directly into her temples. She moved with a fluid, terrifying precision. Every step was measured, perfect, like a dancer who had been trained since birth never to make a mistake. Behind her, 2 escort drones floated silently, spheres of chrome armed with pulse lasers, but she raised a hand, and they halted at the top of the ramp. She descended alone. Jace realized his mouth was open. He snapped it shut. He felt suddenly aware of his grease-stained flight suit, the hole in his boot, the 3 days of stubble on his jaw. She stopped 10 feet from him. The air around her crackled. It was a physical pressure, a static charge that made the hair on Jace's arm stand up. She looked at him. Those nebula eyes seemed to dismantle him, scanning his bone density, his history, his sins. "You are Jace," she said. Her voice was melodic but cold, carrying a resonance that sounded like it was being spoken by 2 voices at once, one human, one digital. Jace shifted his grip on the wrench. "That depends on who is asking. And who gave you the codes to override my door locks?" She did not blink. "I am Lyriel, Princess of the Third Reach, custodian of the Void Fleet, and first daughter of the Blood Sun." Jace stared at her. He let out a short, dry laugh. "Right, and I'm the Emperor of Scrap Metal. Look, lady, I don't know what kind of navigational error brought you to the ass end of the sector, but the luxury docks are 40,000 kilometers that way." He pointed with the wrench. Lyriel did not smile. Her expression remained perfectly smooth, like a porcelain mask. She turned her head slightly, surveying the hangar. Her gaze lingered on the dismantled freighter, then moved to the workbench where Jace had a disassembled ion cannon he was illegally retrofitting for a smuggler. "You bypassed the thermal regulators on that cannon," she noted, her voice flat. "And you have modified the magnetic containment field of this hangar to hide energy signatures. Illegal technology. Class A felony under Imperial law." Jace stiffened. "I fix ships. Sometimes I fix them better than the factory intended." "You are a pilot engineer," she corrected, turning back to face him. "Dishonorable discharge, 7,000 flight hours, expert in propulsion systems and kinetic weaponry. You currently owe 400,000 credits to the Pike Syndicate, and you are 3 months late on the interest." Jace felt the blood drain from his face. "You did your homework. You here to arrest me or collect?" "Neither." She stepped closer. The smell of the electric storm intensified. Up close, he saw the faint geometric patterns etched into her skin, glowing softly. She was terrifyingly beautiful. But there was a tension in her jaw, a tightness around her eyes that spoke of exhaustion held at bay by sheer will. She looked at the wrench in his hand, then up to his eyes. "I require a service. One that utilizes your specific lack of regard for protocol." Jace relaxed his grip slightly, though his heart was still racing. "I'm a mechanic. If you have a flat tire on your magic spaceship, I can take a look. But my hourly rate for royalty is double." She watched him, her head tilting slightly. "You use humor as a defense mechanism. It is inefficient." "It keeps me sane," Jace retorted. "What do you want?" Lyriel glanced at the open hangar doors, then at the flickering security cameras in the corners of the ceiling. She tapped the side of her neural tiara. "Secure the environment," she commanded softly. Suddenly, the air shimmered. A sphere of translucent distortion expanded outward from her, enveloping them both in a bubble of silence. The hum of the station, the distant clank of machinery, the hiss of the leaking pipe, it all vanished. Inside the sphere, the silence was absolute, save for the sound of their breathing. The world outside became a blur of smeared light, like looking through thick rain-slicked glass. Jace backed up a step, raising the wrench again. "Hey, what is this?" "A privacy field," Lyriel said. "Nothing said inside this radius can be recorded, heard, or deciphered by any technology in existence. We are alone." She took a breath, and for the first time, the perfect mask slipped. Her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. Her hands, which had been clasped behind her back, unclenched at her sides. She looked at Jace, and the arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, burning intensity. "I do not have time for games." "Jace," she said. Her voice was lower now, stripped of the digital resonance. It sounded human. Vulnerable. "Okay," Jace said slowly, lowering the wrench. "No games. Why are you here?" Lyriel fixed him with those impossible, shifting eyes. She stepped forward until she was just outside striking distance. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "I have 1 year left," she said. Jace frowned. 1 year left of what? A term? A lease? "Of life," she said. The words hung in the silence of the bubble. "I have 1 year left," she repeated, her voice steady but laced with iron. "Give me an heir and the hangar is yours." Jace stared at her. The words took a moment to process, filtering through the absurdity of the situation. He blinked, looking for the punchline. He let out a bark of incredulous laughter. "Okay. Wow, that is a new one. Is this some kind of reality stream prank? Are there hidden cameras in the drone?" He looked around the blurred sphere. "I assure you, Lyriel said, her voice dropping to a chill whisper. I have never joked in my life. Jace looked at her face. He saw the tremor in her lower lip that she instantly suppressed. He saw the dark circles faintly visible beneath the luminescence of her skin. She was deadly serious. You want? Jace pointed a grimy finger at his own chest. Me? With you? Do not be crude, she snapped, though a faint violet flush colored her cheeks. I require a biological heir, a child, a successor. Why me? Jace demanded, his voice rising. Look at me, princess, I am a grease monkey living in a trash can. You have got a planet full of dukes and genetic super soldiers down there. Why come to the junkyard? Lyriel raised her hand. A holographic projection sprang from her palm, floating in the air between them. It was a complex double helix structure, spinning slowly. My physicians ran a galaxy-wide search, she explained, her tone shifting back to clinical detachment. My genetic markers are unique, highly unstable. 99% of the population is incompatible. If I attempt conception with a standard imperial citizen, the genetic rejection would be fatal to the fetus. She swiped the hologram, and a red strand wove into the helix. You, she said, pointing at Jace, possess a rare recessive mutation from your colony of origin, a genetic adaptability marker. It makes you a viable donor, perhaps the only viable donor within travel distance. Jace looked at the spinning DNA. It looked like nonsense to him, but the look in her eyes was terrifyingly rational. So I am a lab rat, Jace said, bitterness coating his tongue. A stud horse. You are a solution, she said, and I am offering you a transaction. She swiped the hologram again. The DNA vanished, replaced by a rotating 3D schematic. Jace's breath caught. It was a schematic of this hangar, but not the rotting, empty shell it was now. The hologram showed the hangar fully restored, retrofitted with military-grade fabrication units. And docked inside wasn't just the Obsidian shuttle, it was a fleet. 3 heavy cruisers, a squadron of interceptors, and a dreadnought-class carrier. This is the Imperial Hangar Authority, Lyriel said. It is an autonomous sovereignty. Whoever holds the deed to this hangar is immune to local debt collectors, exempt from standard taxes, and holds command over the mothballed 7th Fleet docked within the deep storage vault attached to this station. Jace stared at the ships, the 7th Fleet. It was a legend. Ships that had vanished after the last Great War. You own the 7th Fleet, Jace whispered. Technically, the hangar owns them, Lyriel corrected. And I can sign the deed over to you. Today. She stepped closer, invading his personal space. The scent of ozone was overwhelming now, mixed with something floral and alien. Your debt's paid, she said softly. Your record expunged. A fleet of your own to fly, to sell, to do with as you please. You will never have to fix another broken valve for a smuggler again. You will be free. Jace. Jace felt dizzy. It was everything. It was more than everything. It was a life he had not even dared to dream of since the day he watched that transport burn. Freedom, power, redemption. And the price, Jace said, his voice raspy, is a baby. The price, Lyriel said, her eyes hardening, is the survival of my house. She deactivated the hologram with a sharp gesture. The spinning ships vanished, leaving them alone in the shimmering bubble again. My uncle, Regent Vorath, is to be crowned emperor in exactly 1 year, she said. On that day, my claim to the throne expires unless I have a direct heir. If Vorath takes the throne, he will initiate a crusade against the border systems. He will burn worlds just to see them shine. Jace looked at her. And the 1 year thing? You said you have 1 year left to live. Lyriel looked away. For a second, she looked incredibly young, barely out of her teens, crushed under the weight of 1,000 years of history. It is a fail-safe, she said quietly. My genetic code was engineered by the priesthood. I was designed to be a placeholder until the regent was ready. I have a degenerative sequence encoded in my cells. In 365 days, my nervous system will cascade into failure. I will die. She looked back at him, her eyes fierce. It is a curse, wrapped in science. But if I produce an heir, the succession laws trigger a protection protocol. My line continues. My uncle cannot touch the child, and his legitimacy is challenged. Jace ran a hand through his hair, leaving a smear of grease on his forehead. So you die anyway. I die anyway, she confirmed. But I die leaving a legacy. I die stopping a war. She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin, glowing glass tablet. She held it out to him. This is the contract, she said. It stipulates the transfer of the Hangar and the fleet upon the confirmation of pregnancy. It absolves you of any parental responsibility if you choose to leave. You can take the money and the ships and vanish. Or you can stay. I do not care. I just need the child. Jace looked at the tablet. It hummed in his hand. He looked up at her. You talk about a kid like it is a spare part. Confirm pregnancy. Absolve responsibility. It is a life, lady. It is a necessity, she snapped, her composure cracking. She stepped forward, her chest heaving. She was inches from him now. He could see the gold flecks in her violet irises. He could see the pulse beating frantically in the hollow of her throat. Do you think I want this? She hissed. Do you think I dreamed of bartering my body in a salvage yard to a stranger? I am trapped. Jace. I am a clock counting down to 0. I am selling the only thing I have left to buy a future for my people. Jace held his ground, though her intensity was like a physical blow. He felt a strange, twisted pull toward her. It wasn't just her beauty, though God, she was beautiful. It was the fire. She was burning alive, and she was refusing to scream. You are not buying a future, Jace said, his voice low. You are buying me. I am offering a trade, she countered, her gaze dropping to his lips for a fraction of a second before snapping back to his eyes. We are all bought and sold, pilot. At least I am offering a fair price. Fair? Jace laughed, a bitter sound. You think owning people is fair? I think survival is expensive, she whispered. The air between them crackled. It was heavy with anger, with desperation, and with a sudden sharp spike of attraction that caught Jace off guard. He could smell her skin. He could feel the warmth of her body radiating through the thin space between them. He wanted to push her away, and he wanted to pull her closer. She was terrifying. She was tragic. Jace looked down at the tablet. The text was glowing in standard galactic script. Parties. Princess Lyriel of the Third Reach, Citizen Jace. Subject. Heir Consort Agreement. Remuneration. Title transfer of Imperial Hangar 4 Alpha and attached assets. Heir Consort. The words looked alien next to his name. He thought about the debt collectors. He thought about the leaks in his suit. He thought about the way the people on the refugee ship had screamed before the radio cut out. He could save himself. He could disappear. He could have a fleet, but he would have to sell a piece of his soul to do it. He looked up at Lyriel. She was waiting. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her breath held. I can't just sign this, Jace said hoarsely. I can't just agree to make a person on a dotted line. Then what do you need? She asked. Time, Jace said. I need time to think. 1 hour. Lyriel hesitated. She glanced at the invisible wall of the privacy sphere, as if she could see the seconds ticking away on the other side. 1 hour, she agreed. But no longer. The window of opportunity is closing. She stepped back. The intensity of her presence withdrew slightly, leaving Jace feeling cold. She tapped her tiara, and the privacy sphere dissolved into mist. The noise of the hangar rushed back in, the hum, the clank, the hiss. The world was loud and dirty again. "I will await your answer in my shuttle," Lyriel said, her voice returning to its formal dual-tone resonance. She turned with a swirl of her dark coat and walked back toward the obsidian ship, her drones falling into formation behind her. Jace stood alone in the center of the hangar, the glass tablet heavy in his hand. He looked at the contract again. The holographic letters pulsed. He did not see the shadow move in the rafters high above him. 50 meters up, perched on a rusted support beam. A tiny device no larger than a beetle shifted. Its matte black casing blended perfectly with the gloom. It adjusted its optical lens, zooming in on the tablet in Jace's hand, recording the text, recording Lyriel's retreating form, recording the heat signature of their bodies where they had stood close together. A red light blinked once on the beetle's carapace. Data packet compiled, encrypted, transmitted, far away, in a spire that scraped the edge of the atmosphere. A receiver hummed to life. The conspiracy had begun. Jace paced the length of the hangar deck, the magnetic soles of his boots clicking rhythmically against the scuffed metal. The sound echoed in the vast empty space, bouncing off the hull of the unfinished freighter and the dark, silent mass of the Imperial shuttle parked on the far side. He held the glass tablet in his hand. It was warm to the touch, the holographic text pulsing with a soft, hypnotic rhythm. Heir consort. The words burned into his retinas. He stopped pacing and leaned against a support strut, pressing the heels of his hands into his eyes until sparks danced in his vision. He tried to think about the money. He tried to think about the freedom. But every time he closed his eyes, the memory of the fire returned. It was not the court-martial that haunted him most. It was the silence before it. He saw the refugee transport drifting in the upper atmosphere of Colony 6. He saw the engine flare of the enemy interceptor. He felt the stick shudder in his hand as he tried to lock on, the targeting computer screaming a red warning. Eject. He remembered the sensation of the explosive bolts blowing the canopy, the rush of wind. And then, as he tumbled through the smoke, looking back to see the transport crack open like an egg, he had survived. They had not. "You are vibrating," a voice crackled from the ceiling speakers. "And your heart rate is 120 beats per minute. Are we having a panic attack? Or did the pretty alien lady poison you?" Jace looked up at the sensor cluster hanging near the rafters. "Shut up, Nox." The ship AI K9X manifested as a glitching wireframe avatar on the nearest workbench monitor. The image flickered, distorting into static before stabilizing into the shape of a wolf with too many teeth. "I am simply analyzing the data," Nox said, its voice synthesized and dripping with artificial sarcasm. "You have been staring at that tablet for 45 minutes. My processors calculate a 90% probability that you are considering doing something incredibly stupid." "She offered me the hangar," Jace said, his voice rough. "And the fleet." The wolf avatar tilted its head, its wireframe ears twitching. "I scanned the encryption on the document. It is genuine Imperial legislative code, verified by the Blood Sun seal. Jace, do you have any idea what the 7th Fleet is worth on the black market? We could buy a moon. We could buy a small solar system and make it illegal to wear pants. It is a breeding contract." Knox! Jace snapped, throwing the tablet onto the workbench. It skidded across the metal and came to a rest near a pile of stripped servo motors. She wants a child. She wants me to sign away my rights, provide genetic material, and then disappear. So? Knox asked. Biological imperative is efficient. You provide the raw data. She provides the incubation. You get paid. It is freelancing. Jace, just genetic freelancing. It is selling a life, Jace muttered, staring at the tablet. I can barely take care of myself. I can't be responsible for a kid, not with my record, not with what I did. You did not fire the missile, Jace, Knox said, the sarcasm dropping for a millisecond, replaced by a dull, flat statement of fact. I didn't stop it either, Jace replied quietly. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. I'm not father material, Knox, I'm salvage. Inside the obsidian shuttle, the air was filtered to a pristine, sterile chill. The walls were lined with bioluminescent panels that pulsed in time with the ship's idle reactor. Lyriel stood by the viewport, looking out at the dirty, chaotic interior of the salvage hangar. She had removed her heavy coat, revealing a form-fitting tunic of woven silver silk that clung to her frame. The neural tiara on her brow hummed, feeding her a constant stream of data from the ship's sensors. This is madness, Your Highness, a voice rumbled behind her. Lyriel did not turn. It is necessary. Saren, her chief bodyguard, stepped into the light. He was a towering construct of muscle and cybernetic augmentation, his skin gray and scarred, his eyes replaced by tactical optical strips. He wore the heavy armor of the Praetorian Guard, painted in the colors of her house. He is a human, Saren spat the word like it was poison. A mechanic, a criminal. His blood is thin. It is mud compared to the starlight of your ancestry. To mix your genetic code with his, it is a pollution. It is survival, Lyriel said sharply, turning to face him. Her iridescent eyes flashed with violet fire. My genetic stability is degrading by 0.3% every hour. The physicians gave me a year. I feel it, Saren. I feel my nerves fraying at the edges. I feel the cold creeping in. She held up her hand. The skin was luminous, beautiful, but beneath the surface, faint dark veins were beginning to trace a web of decay. The council sees me as a corpse, she whispered. Vorath sees me as an obstacle. The people see me as a symbol. No one sees me. I am just an asset, a womb with a crown, a clock ticking down. Saren's mechanical eyes whirred as he focused on her hand. His expression softened, the aggression bleeding out of his stance. We could find another way, he said. The high priests work for my uncle. Lyriel cut him off. They engineered this. Do not be naive, Saren. This curse is not nature. It is sabotage. And if I die without an heir, Vorath takes the throne. He will launch the crusade. He will burn the border systems. Millions will die. She looked back out the window at the figure of Jace, small and ragged in the distance, arguing with his workbench monitor. That human, she said softly, is the only variable Vorath did not account for. He is messy. He is desperate. And according to the scans, he is strong. He is a risk, Saren warned. I have nothing left to lose but my life, Lyriel said. And I have already lost that. Deep within the imperial capital, in a chamber where the shadows seemed to have physical weight, Regent Vorath sat upon a floating throne of black iron. The room was circular, the walls lined with tanks of suspended fluid where strange biological shapes drifted in stasis. A holographic projection hovered in the center of the room. It was grainy, captured by a stealth drone high in the rafters of a salvage hangar. It showed Jace and Lyriel standing close. It showed the heat signatures of their bodies merging in the infrared spectrum. It showed the transfer of the data tablet. Vorath leaned forward. He was a beautiful man, in the way a glacier is beautiful, cold, sharp, and capable of crushing mountains. His skin was pale gold, his eyes burning with a fervent, fanatical intelligence. "She is more resourceful than I anticipated," Vorath murmured. His voice was smooth, like oil over gravel. A figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a hooded operative, their face obscured by a shifting digital mask. "The genetic compatibility is confirmed," the operative stated. "The human is a match. If conception occurs, the legal protocols will shield her. Your claim to the throne will be challenged." Vorath waved a hand dismissively. "A challenge is only a threat if it survives to speak." He zoomed in on the image of Jace. He studied the pilot's tired face, the grease on his cheek, the desperation in his posture. He is nothing, Vorath decided. Debris. But debris can clog the gears of history if allowed to remain. He looked at the operative. "We cannot touch Lyriel directly. Not yet. The optics would be poor. But the human, he is expendable. Accidents happen in the salvage sector. It is a dangerous profession." "Understood," the operative said. "Do not kill him immediately," Vorath corrected, a cruel smile touching his lips. "Make it messy. Make it public. Let Lyriel see exactly what happens to those who dare to touch the divine. Break her spirit, and the body will follow." The hour was up. Lyriel walked down the ramp of her ship, her boots striking the hangar deck with purpose. She had composed herself, rebuilt the mask of royal indifference. She was the princess of the Third Reach again. Jace was waiting for her by the workbench. He had washed his face, though the grime was ingrained in the lines of his skin. He looked tired. "You have a decision," Lyriel said. It was not a question. Jace picked up the tablet. He held it for a moment, weighing it, then held it out to her. "I can't do it," he said. Lyriel froze. She did not take the tablet. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Jace said, his voice steady. "I'm not a stud for hire, princess. I'm not going to father a kid just so you can win a political chess match and then discard me like a used engine part." Lyriel stared at him. The rejection hit her like a physical slap. She had offered him a kingdom. She had offered him freedom. "You are refusing?" she asked, her voice rising. "Do you understand what you are throwing away? The hangar, the fleet, your freedom." "It is not freedom if I have to sell myself to get it," Jace shot back. "And it sure as hell isn't freedom for the kid. What happens to them? Raised in a palace by drones? Used as a prop for your uncle's coronation?" "That is none of your concern," Lyriel snapped, stepping forward. The air began to smell of ozone again. "You are a coward, Jace. You are afraid. You hide in this junkyard because you are terrified of taking a risk that actually matters." "Coward?" Jace laughed bitterly. "I fought in the Rim Wars while you were getting pedicures in a sky palace. Do not talk to me about risk. I know what real loss looks like. It looks like burning ships. It looks like silence. It doesn't look like a contract." "You think this is a business merger to me?" Lyriel shouted, her mask shattering completely. "You think I want this? Then why are you doing it?" Jace yelled back. "Why are you buying people?" "Because I am terrified." The scream echoed in the hangar. Lyriel stood there, chest heaving, her hands trembling at her sides. The iridescent fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a wash of wet, human tears. "I am terrified," she repeated, her voice cracking. "I am 24 cycles old, and in 1 year, I am going to die. I will rot from the inside out. My nerves will misfire until I cannot move, until I cannot breathe. She took a step toward him, not menacing this time, but pleading. I have spent my entire life being a symbol, she whispered, a piece of the succession, a key to a lock. No one has ever looked at me and seen a person. They see a bloodline. They see an asset. She wiped a tear from her cheek, her fingers glowing where they touched her skin. I do not just want an heir to save the throne, she confessed, her voice barely audible. I want to leave something behind that is real. I want to know that for one moment. I created life instead of just inheriting it. I want to be loved, Jace. Or at least, I want to be needed for who I am, not for the crown I wear. Jace looked at her. He saw the cracks in the porcelain. He saw the scared young woman hiding inside the royal armor. The anger drained out of him, leaving a hollow ache. You should have started with that, Jace said softly. Instead of the money. Lyriel looked down, ashamed. I do not know how to ask for things without paying for them. It is how I was raised. Jace sighed. He rubbed the back of his neck. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was fragile. You are hungry, Jace stated. Lyriel blinked, confused by the shift. My nutritional intake is monitored by... No, Jace interrupted. I mean, you are hungry. For real food, not nutrient paste or royal nectar or whatever you drink. He gestured with his thumb toward the hangar doors. There is a noodle bar on the promenade level. It is greasy. It smells like onions. And the chef yells at everyone. Come on. I cannot leave the secure zone, Lyriel said automatically. Nox can jam the local sensors, Jace said. Put your hood up, slum it with the commoners for an hour. Talk to me like a normal person. Then we will talk about the contract. Lyriel hesitated. She looked at her ship, then at Jace. She took a deep breath and pulled the hood of her dark coat up, shadowing her glowing face. Very well, she said. The noodle bar was a sensory assault. Steam hissed from oversized woks, neon signs buzzed with headaches-inducing colors, and the air was thick with the smell of spices that made the eyes water. Lyriel sat on a spinning vinyl stool, her posture rigidly vertical. She looked like a swan trying to balance on a beach ball. She stared at the bowl of noodles in front of her with a mixture of fascination and horror. It is gelatinous, she observed. It is noodles, Jace said, cracking a pair of disposable wooden chopsticks. Here, you do it like this. He demonstrated. Lyriel picked up her chopsticks. She held them like surgical instruments. She attempted to pinch a cluster of noodles, but they slipped free, splashing broth onto the pristine cuff of her coat. She gasped, looking at the stain as if she had been shot. Jace laughed. It was a genuine sound, rusty but real. It is just broth, princess. It washes out. Lyriel glared at him, then looked at the chopsticks. Determination set in. She stabbed the noodles violently. That is one way to do it, Jace grinned. This utensil is illogical, she muttered, lifting a clump of noodles to her mouth. She tasted it. Her eyes widened. It is extremely sodium-rich. That is the flavor of poverty, Jace said, taking a mouthful. Salt and heat. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the noise of the station swirling around them. Miners shouted at a vid screen in the corner. A smuggler argued with a vendor. It was life, messy and loud. Where did you grow up? Lyriel asked suddenly. You mentioned a colony. Colony 6, Jace said. The smile faded slightly. Terraforming project on the rim. Red dust. High gravity. We spent half our time digging scrub roots and the other half fixing the atmospheric scrubbers. I learned to weld before I could write. It sounds difficult, she said. It was, Jace admitted. But it was ours. We knew everyone. If you fell down, 3 people picked you up. What about you? The palace? The Imperial Garden, Lyriel said. It is a zero-gravity biodome orbiting the capital. I was raised there. It is beautiful. There are flowers that sing when you touch them. She swirled her noodles. I was there for 18 years. I was never alone. Drones, guards, tutors. They watched me sleep. They watched me eat. They analyzed my waist. I never scraped my knee. I never got dirty. I was a specimen. She looked at Jace. I think I would have liked the red dust. Jace looked at her, under the neon lights, with sauce on her chin and her hood askew. She didn't look like an alien princess. She looked like a lonely girl. Hey, Jace said, unsay my name. She blinked. Jace. No, my full name. Jace Eris. Jace Eris. She pronounced it perfectly. Now let me try yours, Jace said. Lyriel, what was it? Third reach? Lyriel Valdrak and Thethelgard, she said. Lyriel Valdrak and Thathelgard. Jace butchered it. Sounds like a throat infection. Lyriel let out a sound that was half gasp, half giggle. She covered her mouth, her eyes crinkling. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile. It transformed her face, making her radiant in a way the bioluminescence never could. You are ridiculous, she said. I try. Jace smiled. The air in the bar suddenly changed. The hair on Jace's arm stood up. It wasn't the royal aura this time. It was the static charge of a high-yield capacitor charging up. Jace's combat instincts, buried under 3 years of grease and alcohol, screamed, drop. Down! Jace roared. He launched himself off his stool, grabbing Lyriel by the shoulders and tackling her to the dirty floor. Crack hiss. A bolt of superheated plasma tore through the space where Lyriel's head had been a microsecond before. It punched through the transparasteel window of the bar, shattering the structural integrity field. The station's decompression alarm screamed. A sound felt more than heard as the air was sucked out of the room with a violent whoosh. Debris flew. Tables, chairs, and steaming bowls of noodles were ripped toward the shattered window. Jace slammed Lyriel into the corner behind the heavy counter of the noodle stand. He pressed his body over hers, shielding her with his back. He dug his boots into the bolted-down fixtures, fighting the vacuum that tried to drag them into space. The wind roared, tearing at his clothes. He felt Lyriel trembling beneath him, her hands clutching his flight suit. Hold on, he yelled over the roar. Emergency blast shutters slammed down over the window, cutting off the vacuum with a deafening clang. The air pressure began to stabilize. The wind died. Silence returned, broken only by the sobbing of the noodle chef and the mechanical wail of the alarm. Jace stayed on top of her for a moment, his breathing ragged. He could feel her heart hammering against his chest, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Her body was soft beneath the silk, warm and terrifyingly fragile. He lifted his head. They were inches apart. Her hood had fallen back. Her eyes were wide, the irises swirling chaotically. Are you hit? Jace demanded, scanning her for burns. I am uninjured, Lyriel whispered. She stared at him. He was heavy, pressing her into the grime of the floor. But she did not push him away. She felt the solid reality of him, the wall of muscle and bone that had just placed itself between her and death. Jace rolled off her, crouching low, his eyes scanning the room. He saw the scorch mark on the wall behind the stool. It was perfectly placed, a kill shot. We need to move, Jace said, grabbing her hand. Now. They scrambled out the back exit, Jace moving with a predator's grace, pulling her through the service corridors back toward the hangar. It was a pirate, Lyriel gasped as they ran. A random discharge, a gang dispute. Jace stopped at the blast door to Hangar 4, punching in the code. He turned to her, his face hard. Pirates use scatterguns, Jace said grimly. That was a coherent plasma lance, military grade, sniper configuration, and it was aimed right at your neural tiara. No. Lyriel shook her head, but her voice wavered. My uncle would not. Not here. Not publicly. He missed, Jace said. He won't miss twice. He shoved her into the hangar. Get to your ship. Saren is probably tearing the station apart looking for you. Lyriel stood in the open doorway of the hangar. Jace! Go! Jace commanded, and she turned and ran toward the obsidian shuttle. That night, Jace sat on the edge of his bunk in the small, cramped living quarters attached to the hangar. The air recycler wheezed in the corner. The contract tablet sat on his knee. He traced the glowing lines of the agreement. He thought about the plasma bolt. He thought about the way Lyriel had looked in the noodle bar, laughing with sauce on her chin. He thought about the fear in her eyes when she admitted she didn't want to die. And he thought about Vorath. If Lyriel died. Vorath took the throne. If Vorath took the throne, the 7th Fleet, the fleet docked right here, would be used to slaughter the border systems. The systems where Jace had grown up. The systems where people like the ones on that refugee transport still lived. Jace closed his eyes. He had spent 3 years running from his guilt. He had hidden in a hole, telling himself he was trash, that he didn't deserve to make a difference. But this wasn't just about him anymore. He wasn't just saving a princess. He was holding the line. Nox, Jace said into the darkness. I am here, the AI replied from the wall console. Open a channel to the shuttle. Jace stood in the center of the hangar. He had changed into a fresh flight suit. He had shaved. The ramp of the shuttle lowered. Lyriel walked down. She was back in her armor, the high collar, the coat, the poise. But her eyes were guarded. She stopped in front of him. You called, she said. I did, Jace said. He held up the tablet. I will do it, Jace said. Lyriel's breath hitched. You will? On one condition, Jace said. He stepped closer. This isn't a transaction, not anymore. Vorath tried to kill you today. That makes this a war. And in a war, you don't need a donor. You need a wingman. He tapped the tablet, activating the editing mode. I am adding a clause, Jace said. Clause 4 Alpha. Decisions regarding the asset, the child, and the fleet are made jointly. 50-50. We are partners, equals. I am not a stud, and you are not an incubator. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. He held the tablet out to her. The new text glowed in gold. Lyriel looked at the words. Partners, equals. She looked up at Jace. She searched his face for deceit, for greed. She found only a grim, determined resolve. Equals, she repeated softly. The word tasted strange on her tongue, forbidden and sweet. She reached out. Her hand trembled slightly. She placed her fingertips on the tablet, right over Jace's hand. Agreed, she whispered, as her skin touched his. A spark of static electricity, blue and violet, jumped between them. It was sharp, shocking, and undeniable. They both flinched but did not pull away. The hologram swirled around their joined hands, sealing the pact in light. Good, Jace said, his voice husky. Now, let's go steal you an empire. The sanctum of unions aboard the royal flagship Ethelgard's Pride did not look like a place for a wedding. It looked like the inside of a living heart. Jace stood in the center of the circular chamber, feeling suffocated by the collar of his ceremonial robes. They were heavy, woven from stiff golden thread that scratched his neck, a sharp contrast to the familiar grease-stained comfort of his flight suit. The walls of the chamber were not metal, but a translucent crystalline substance that hummed with a low, resonant frequency. Vines of bioluminescent flora, native to the imperial gardens, climbed the crystal surfaces, pulsing with a rhythmic blue light that matched the beat of the ship's reactor core. Or perhaps, Jace thought, they were matching the beat of his own terrified heart. Lyriel stood opposite him. If Jace looked uncomfortable, Lyriel looked like a deity descending to earth. She wore a gown of flowing white silica weave that seemed to float around her body, defying the artificial gravity. Her hair was woven with intricate silver filaments, and the neural tiara on her brow shone with a piercing intensity. Her face was composed, the mask of the princess firmly in place. But her eyes, those shifting iridescent nebulas, were darting toward him with a mixture of anxiety and reassurance. Between them stood the bio-interface. It was a podium grown from white coral, topped with a gelatinous glowing membrane that looked disturbingly wet. 3 high priests of the Blood Sun surrounded them. They were tall, gaunt figures hidden within crimson cowls. Their hands withered and gray. They chanted in High Ethelgardian, a language that sounded like grinding stones and breaking glass. The sound vibrated in Jace's teeth. "You must place your hands into the interface," Lyriel whispered, her voice barely carrying over the chanting. "Do not flinch. It will read your genetic markers and fuse them into the Imperial Registry. It is the only way to make the heir legal." Jace looked at the glowing slime. "Into it? It looks like it is going to digest me." "It is a nutrient matrix," Lyriel hissed, her poise slipping just a fraction. "Just do it, Jace." One of the priests raised a skeletal hand, the chanting reaching a crescendo that made the vines on the walls flare with bright violet light. The priest glared at Jace, waiting. Jace took a deep breath. "Right, nutrient matrix. Here goes nothing." He plunged his hands into the gel. It was warm and tingled like a mild electric shock. He felt microscopic tendrils latching onto his skin, sampling his blood, reading his code. Beside him, Lyriel did the same, her expression stoic. The machine hummed louder. The data streams in the air above them turned from red to gold, intertwining in a double helix that bound their names together. Jace, his nerves frayed to the breaking point by the solemnity and the alien weirdness of it all, leaned slightly toward Lyriel. "So," he whispered loudly enough for the priest to hear, "is this the part where we sacrifice a goat? Or do we just trade blood samples and call it a date?" Lyriel's eyes widened. She pressed her lips together, fighting a reaction, but the sheer absurdity of his comment amidst the holy chanting broke through her training. She let out a loud, ungraceful snort, a sound entirely unbecoming of a princess. The chanting stopped abruptly. The 3 priests froze. The vines on the walls seemed to dim in confusion. The high priest lowered his cowl, revealing a face of horror. "Sacrilege," he wheezed. Lyriel composed herself instantly, though her cheeks were flushed a deep, luminous purple. She cleared her throat, regaining her regal bearing. "The consort is still unfamiliar with our customs. High One, he speaks in metaphors. Proceed with the synchronization." The priest looked at Jace with deep suspicion, then sighed, a dusty, rattling sound. "The synchronization requires proximity. Step into the field." Jace pulled his hands from the gel, shaking off the slime. "Synchronization? Just come here," Lyriel said, grabbing his wrist and pulling him to the center of the dais. A ring of emitters in the floor activated. A column of shimmering, distorted air encased them. Immediately, the sound of the priests and the ship faded away, replaced by a high-pitched whine. "This is a psychometric amplifier," Lyriel explained, her voice trembling slightly. "It ensures that the genetic donors are compatible not just biologically, but chemically, emotionally. It prevents rejection." "What does that mean?" Jace asked. Before she could answer, the field hit him. It was not pain. It was a rush of sensation that wasn't his own. He felt a wave of cold fear wash over him, fear of death, fear of failure, fear of the dark. But he wasn't afraid. It was Lyriel's fear. He looked at her and saw her gasp. She was feeling him. She was feeling his awe at her beauty, his lingering guilt over the war, and the sudden, overwhelming protective instinct he had developed for her. The field pushed them together. Jace wrapped his arms around her waist to steady her. She gripped his shoulders. They were pressed chest to chest, the heavy robes no barrier to the heat radiating between them. "You are so loud," Lyriel whispered, her eyes wide, staring up at him. "Your mind. It is so chaotic, but honest." "You are terrified," Jace murmured back, feeling her heart hammer against his own, or was it his heart? The line was blurred. "Lyriel, you are shaking." "I do not want to die," she confessed, the words amplified by the field, echoing directly in his skull. "I have got you," Jace said, and he meant it. The thought projected into the field, a solid, unshakable promise. "I am not going anywhere." The field turned a brilliant, blinding gold. The synchronization peaked, a spike of shared adrenaline and desire that made Jace's knees weak. For a second, he wanted to kiss her right there, in front of the priests and the gods and the galaxy. He felt her want it too, a sharp, hungry pull in the center of her chest. Then the field collapsed. They stumbled apart, breathless. The priests were bowing, marking the slate with holographic styluses. The union was registered. The contract was sealed. An hour later, they stood in Lyriel's private sanctuary. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, terrifying grandeur of the ritual chamber. This room was warm, lit by dozens of anti-gravity candles that drifted lazily in the air like fireflies. The far wall was a single, seamless pane of glass looking out into the void, where the stars of the core systems burned cold and bright. Lyriel stood by the window, her back to him. She reached up and unclasped the heavy ceremonial cloak, letting it slide to the floor in a pool of gold fabric. Underneath, she wore a simple slip of white silk. The ceremony had activated the bioluminescence in her skin fully. Intricate, swirling patterns of violet light traced the line of her spine, her arms, and the curve of her neck. They were not tattoos. They were part of her, a living map of her lineage. "It is done," she said softly. "By imperial law, we are bound. If I conceive now, Voreth cannot touch me without risking civil war." Jace walked further into the room. He felt out of place in his uniform, too rough for this delicate, beautiful space. "You acted well back there, even with the snort." Lyriel turned. Her hair was loose now, falling in silver waves around her shoulders. "I have never snorted in my life," she defended, though a small smile played on her lips. "You are a bad influence, Jace Heiress." "I try my best." He stopped a few feet from her. The air in the room felt charged, heavy with the residual energy of the synchronization field. He could still feel the echo of her fear and the stronger, louder echo of her desire. Lyriel stepped closer. She looked up at him, her iridescent eyes searching his face. The playfulness vanished, replaced by an intensity that made Jace's mouth go dry. "We have a contract to fulfill," she whispered. "We do," Jace said, His voice sounded rough to his own ears. She reached out and placed a hand on his chest, right over his heart. Her palm was warm, and he could feel the faint hum of her energy through his shirt. But the field... She hesitated. What I felt in the field, that was not a contract. That was you. Yeah, Jace admitted. That was me. She looked at his lips, and the invitation was clear, but it was also a command, a plea, and a question all at once. Jace leaned in. He moved slowly, giving her 1,000 chances to back away. She didn't. She rose on her toes, closing the distance, and when their lips met, it wasn't the tentative, polite kiss of a courtier. It was a collision. Lyriel made a small sound in her throat and gripped the lapels of his jacket, pulling him down. Her mouth was soft, tasting of the sweet nectar wine from the ceremony. But her kiss was hungry. It was the kiss of someone who had been starving for a lifetime. Jace wrapped his arms around her, pulling her flush against him. The desire that had been simmering since the hangar bay boiled over. He forgot the debt. He forgot the fleet. He forgot the galaxy outside the window. All that existed was the heat of her skin and the desperate way she clung to him. She pulled back for a breath, her forehead resting against his. "Jace," she breathed, her voice wrecked. She took his hand and led him toward the low, expansive bed that dominated the center of the room. The silk sheets looked like spilled water in the candlelight. She sat on the edge, pulling him to stand between her knees. Her hands went to the fasteners of his jacket. Her fingers were trembling so hard she couldn't undo the top clasp. "Lyriel," Jace said. "I need this," she whispered, frustration and desire warring in her tone. "I need to know I am alive." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and vulnerable. "Please." Jace covered her trembling hands with his own, stopping her. He looked down at her. He saw the desperation. He saw the way she was offering herself up, not just because she wanted him, but because she thought she had to, because she was a clock ticking down, because she was an asset to be used. "Stop," Jace said gently. Lyriel froze. A look of devastating hurt crossed her face. She pulled her hands back as if burned. You do not want me?" "God, Lyriel, look at me," Jace said, kneeling so he was eye level with her. "I want you so much I can barely think straight. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "Then why?" she asked, her voice small. "Because you are shaking," Jace said softly. He reached out and brushed a strand of silver hair from her face. "And because 5 hours ago, you told me you were tired of being a transaction. If we do this now, because of the contract, because you are scared of the deadline, then it is just another deal. It is just biology." He took her face in his hands. "I am not Vorath. I am not the priesthood. I do not want your genetic code, Lyriel. I want you. And I want you to choose this, not for the heir, not for the empire, but because you want it." Lyriel stared at him. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, her eyes filled with tears. They spilled over, glowing faintly as they tracked down her cheeks. "No one," she choked out. "No one has ever asked." "I am asking," Jace said. Lyriel let out a sob that broke the dam. She launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around his neck and burying her face in his shoulder. She cried, not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming relief of being seen, of being treated as a person with agency, not a vessel. Jace held her, rocking her gently as she wept. He stroked her hair, murmuring soft nonsense until her shaking subsided. When she pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. The frantic desperation was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet warmth. "Stay," she said. "Please, just Stay. I told you, Jace said, kissing her forehead. I am not going anywhere. They did not fulfill the contract that night. Instead, they lay together on the vast bed, fully clothed, wrapped in each other's arms. They watched the stars rotate outside the window. Lyriel rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Tell me about the ocean moon, she whispered sleepily. The mission tomorrow. It is wet, Jace rumbled, his arm draped protectively over her. And dangerous. And we are going to be fine. I know, she murmured. Because we are partners. Yeah, Jace said, closing his eyes. Partners. While Jace and Lyriel slept, deep in the bowels of the capital city. A shadow moved through the digital architecture of the Imperial medical grid. The operative was not physically present. Their consciousness was projected into the server, a razor-sharp avatar of code slicing through firewalls. They found the file marked Subject, Lyriel. The operative accessed the genetic decay algorithm. It was currently set to a 12-month trajectory. With a thought, the operative manipulated the code. They injected a subtle enzyme trigger simulation, rewriting the prognosis. Updated trajectory, 9 months. The operative then opened a secondary file. Subject, Jace Eris. They tagged the file with a crimson marker. Status, expendable. Priority, terminate upon conception. The operative withdrew, leaving no trace but the accelerated tick of a clock that was already running too fast. The next morning, the hangar bay was a flurry of activity. But it wasn't the pristine Imperial shuttle they were boarding. It was Jace's ship, the Rusty Bucket. Technically, it was a Corellian pattern heavy freighter, heavily modified with illegal thrusters and patchwork armor. But Bucket suited it better. It sat next to Lyriel's sleek yacht like a bulldog next to a greyhound. We are taking this? Saren asked, staring at the ship with undisguised contempt. The bodyguard was fully armored, carrying a plasma repeater that looked heavy enough to anchor a building. It has a localized stealth drive, Jace said, patting the hull affectionately. And it doesn't broadcast Imperial transponder codes. If we want to get to the ocean moon without Vorath knowing, we fly garbage. I prefer the term vintage. Knox's voice crackled from the external speakers. And I will have you know my hull integrity is at 98%. The rust is structural. Lyriel walked up the ramp, wearing a practical flight suit she had replicated to match Jace's, though hers was tailored and irritatingly clean. Saren, stop complaining and we are on a schedule. 2 other figures were arguing by the cargo lift. You put the graviton stabilizer on backward, you four-eyed grease stain, shouted Vix. She was a tall, lanky reptilian alien with green scales and a crest of feathers on her head. It is an inverted polarity mounting, you uneducated swamp lizard, retorted Talo. He was short, round, and covered in blue fur, wearing goggles that magnified his eyes to comically large proportions. Are they coming? Saren asked, looking pained. Vix and Talo, Jace introduced them. Best engineers in the sector. They hate each other. But they can fix a hyperdrive with a spoon and some chewing gum. We need them to breach the vault on the warship. Wonderful, Saren grumbled. A circus. The flight to the ocean moon of Thalassa Prime was turbulent. Jace piloted with Lyriel in the co-pilot seat. She watched him work, fascinated by the way his hands flew over the manual controls, switches, levers, and dials that seemed archaic compared to her neural interfaces. You actually feel the ship, she noted. There is no autocorrection. Autocorrection makes you lazy. Jace grinned, wrestling the yoke as they hit the upper atmosphere of the moon. Hang on. It is going to get bumpy. Thalassa Prime was a world of angry water. The entire surface was a churning gray ocean, whipped into frenzies by the gravitational pull of the gas giant it orbited. Lightning, thick as tree trunks, hammered the waves constantly. "Target sighted," Knox announced. "Imperial warship Indomitable. Crash site coordinates confirmed. It is resting on a coral shelf, half submerged." Jace brought the bucket down, skimming the wave tops. The wreck loomed out of the rain like a dead steel mountain. The Indomitable was a relic of the Unification War. Its hull split open, jagged metal teeth pointing at the storm-racked sky. "Landing is impossible," Saren said from the back. "There is no flat surface." "Who said we are landing?" Jace flicked a switch. Magnetic grapples engaged. "We are going to stick to the side like a barnacle." With a massive metallic clang, the bucket attached itself to the upright hull of the wrecked warship. The ship groaned, but held. "Suit up," Jace commanded. "Gravity inside is going to be a nightmare." The interior of the Indomitable was a tomb. The air was stale and smelled of salt and ancient decay. The emergency lights flickered with a dying yellow strobe. Because the ship was tilted at a 45-degree angle, the floor was a steep slope. They had to use mag boots to walk, the metal clanking with every step. "The biotech vault is in the central core," Lyriel said, checking a wrist-mounted scanner. 10 levels down, or sideways, I suppose. Vix and Tallow were arguing about the atmospheric composition, but fell silent as they passed the first blast doors. Beyond lay the main corridor. It was filled with ghosts. Not spirits, but echoes, malfunctioning holographic security logs that had been looping for 50 years. Jace stopped. In front of them, a flickering blue soldier was screaming orders, firing a phantom rifle at an unseen enemy. Another soldier dragged a wounded comrade, leaving a trail of pixelated blood. "This was the Battle of the Reach," Lyriel whispered, staring at the carnage. "My history tutors taught me this was a glorious victory, that the rebels surrendered peacefully." She watched a holographic rebel get disintegrated by an Imperial heavy trooper. The scream was distorted by static, but it was still human. "History is written by the winners," Jace said quietly, stepping between her and the image. "Vorath's version of peace usually involves a lot of dead bodies." "It is a lie," Lyriel said, her voice shaking with anger. "All of it. The glory, the divine right, it is just slaughter." "Movement!" Saren barked, raising his heavy cannon. The shadows at the end of the corridor detached themselves. They weren't holograms. Security drones. Ancient, rusted, and looking like floating squids made of metal and hate. Their sensors glowed an angry red as they locked onto the intruders. "Defense protocols active," Knox warned in their headsets. "They think we are the rebels." "Take cover!" Jace yelled. He grabbed Lyriel and shoved her behind a bulkhead just as the air filled with laser fire. Saren opened up with his plasma cannon, the roar deafening in the confined space. Vix and Tallow shrieked and returned fire with small sidearms. "I need to get to the console to override them," Lyriel shouted over the noise. She pointed to a terminal across the corridor, exposed to the line of fire. "I will cover you," Jace yelled. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Jace broke cover, firing his kinetic pistol with precision. He drew the fire of the drones, sparks exploding off his armor. Lyriel sprinted. She moved with that terrifying grace, sliding under a laser blast, rolling, and slamming her hand onto the console. Her neural tiara flared as she interfaced with the ancient machine. "Command override," she screamed. "Authorization code Valdraken 001. The drones froze. Their red eyes turned blue. They drifted aimlessly, neutralized. "Clear!" Lyriel gasped, leaning against the console. But the ship wasn't done with them. The vibrations from the gunfire had loosened something high above. "Structural failure detected," Knox said calmly. Jace looked up. A massive section of overhead conduit, heavy with 50 years of rust and water, sheared off directly above Lyriel. "Lyriel!" Jace didn't think. He lunged. He tackled her away from the console just as the conduit slammed down. It missed her head by inches, but the jagged edge caught Jace across the back and shoulder. He grunted, a sharp, wet sound, and they tumbled down the slanted floor, crashing into a pile of debris. Dust billowed. Silence returned. "Jace!" Lyriel's voice was frantic, and she scrambled out from under him. "Jace!" Jace groaned, rolling onto his back. His flight suit was torn at the shoulder, the fabric dark with blood. "I am okay," he wheezed. "Just knocked the wind out of me." "You are bleeding," Lyriel said, her hands hovering over him, glowing with panic. "Just a scratch," Jace lied, trying to sit up and failing as the room spun. "Saren!" Lyriel shouted. "Get the med kit. We are retreating to the ship. Now!" The medbay on the rusty bucket was the size of a closet, smelling of antiseptic and stale coffee. Jace sat on the exam table, shirtless. The wound on his shoulder was a nasty gash, deep enough to need sutures but not life-threatening. Lyriel was stitching him up. She had refused to let Vix or Saren do it. Her hands, usually so steady, were trembling slightly as she worked the dermal regenerator. "You are an idiot," she said, her voice tight. "Ow!" Jace winced as the laser fused the skin. Is that royal protocol? Insulting the patient? "You threw yourself under a falling beam," she snapped, blinking back tears. "You could have broken your spine. You could have died." "But I didn't," Jace said. "And you didn't get squashed, so I call that a win." "This is not a joke, Jace." She stopped working and looked at him. Her eyes were fierce, burning with that violet fire. "You are not expendable. Do you understand me? You are not just some bodyguard. You are my partner. If you die, I—" She trailed off, her throat working. Jace reached out with his good arm and took her hand. "Hey, look at me." She looked. "I have spent 3 years watching people die because I was too slow," Jace said quietly. "I am not letting that happen to you. Not on my watch. And certainly not by a piece of rusty plumbing." Lyriel let out a shaky breath. Half laugh, half sob. She resumed working on his shoulder, her touch gentler now. "You really enjoy being the hero, do you not?" she murmured. "I am no hero," Jace said, watching her face. "I am just a guy trying to impress a girl." Lyriel finished the suture. She ran her fingers lightly over the new scar, her bioluminescence pulsing softly against his skin. The touch sent a shiver through him that had nothing to do with the pain. "Well," she whispered, leaning in close, her scent of ozone and flowers filling his senses. "Consider me impressed." She lingered there for a moment, her face inches from his bare chest. The air in the tiny medbay grew thick and heavy. It was the same tension from the ritual, the same hunger from the bedroom, but deepened by the adrenaline of survival. "We got the gene key," Jace whispered, his voice husky. "Vix grabbed it from the vault while I was bleeding on the floor." "I do not care about the key right now," Lyriel murmured, her eyes drifting to his lips. The door to the medbay whooshed open. "Good news!" Knox announced loudly. "I have analyzed the gene key. It is fully functional. Also, Saren says if you two are done gazing into each other's souls, we have 3 Imperial patrol cruisers on our tail." Lyriel jumped back, her face flushing purple. Jace grabbed his shirt, wincing. "Duty calls." Jace groaned. Lyriel looked at him, her composure returning, but the warmth remained in her eyes. After we escape, she promised, I am going to yell at you some more. Looking forward to it, princess. Jace grinned. They ran for the cockpit, leaving the quiet intimacy of the medbay behind for the chaos of the storm outside. The gene key sat on the diagnostic table in the mess hall of the Rusty Bucket, looking deceptively simple. It was a cylinder of spun platinum, suspended in a magnetic field, humming with a sound that felt like a migraine trying to happen. Vix, the reptilian engineer, tapped a claw against her datapad. It is not just a storage drive, she hissed, her feathered crest vibrating with excitement. It is an editor, a root access tool for biological coding. Talo, standing on a crate to see over the table, adjusted his oversized goggles. It was built by the founders. Look at the syntax. It is designed to unlock genetic encryption, specifically the encryption used in the Imperial bloodline. Jace leaned against the bulkhead, his arms crossed over his chest. His shoulder was stiff from the injury on the ocean moon, but the pain was a grounding tether. In English, Talo, what does it do? It deletes the curse, Lyriel said. She was standing at the head of the table, staring at the device with a look of terrified awe. Her skin was pale, the bioluminescence dimmed to a faint, ghostly gray. The failsafe, she continued, her voice trembling. The kill switch Vorath's priests put inside me. This device can identify the artificial sequence and rewrite it. It can turn the clock off. Jace pushed off the wall. That is it. Then, we use it, we plug you in, scrub the bad code, and you live past the 1-year mark. Problem solved. It is not that simple, Lyriel whispered. It sounds pretty simple to me, Jace said, stepping closer. You said you wanted to live. This is the off switch. Jace, Lyriel turned to him, her eyes wide and frantic. Do you not understand what this device implies? The Imperial dogma states that the blood-sun line is divine. We are told our genetics are perfect, immutable, gifted by the stars themselves. If I use this, if I admit that my biology can be edited like a common software patch, it proves that we are not gods. So, Jace asked him, you are not a god and you are a person who is going to die in 12 months if we do not use this. If I expose the lie, Lyriel argued, her voice rising, the faith collapses, the authority of the throne evaporates. Vorath is dangerous because he abuses the system. But if the system itself is proven to be a fraud, chaos, civil war, 100 systems declaring independence overnight, the bloodshed would be unimaginable. So you would rather die? Jace shouted. The sudden volume made Talo squeak and hide behind Vix. You would rather let Vorath win and let yourself rot from the inside out just to keep up a lie? I would rather not burn the galaxy down to save my own skin, Lyriel shouted back. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The hum of the gene key seemed to grow louder. It is not just your skin anymore, Jace said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. We made a deal, partners, 50-50. You do not get to decide to sacrifice yourself without my vote. And I vote you live. Lyriel stared at him. She looked trapped, caught between the terrifying weight of her duty and the terrifying possibility of freedom. I need time, she said, backing away. Do not activate the key. That is an order. I do not take orders from you, Jace said. Remember? Please, she whispered. The word hung in the air, fragile as glass. She turned and fled the mess hall, her footsteps echoing rapidly down the corridor. Jace slammed his hand against the bulkhead, making the metal ring. He looked at Nox's avatar on the wall screen. Course? We are approaching the Freeport moon of Zagara, Knox replied, his tone unusually subdued. We need fuel cells and fresh water, and perhaps some therapy. Zagara was a sensory assault. It was a neutral trade moon, a chaotic hive of commerce where imperial law was just a suggestion, and the neon signs were bright enough to burn retinas. The market district was a canyon of floating stalls and suspended walkways. The air smelled of frying spices, burning ozone, and unwashed bodies. Music throbbed from a dozen different bars, a cacophony of bass and synthesized wails. Jace walked through the crowd, keeping a protective hand near the blaster on his hip. Beside him walked a figure in a heavy, rough-spun cloak. Keep your head down, Jace muttered. If anyone asks, you are a pilgrim from the Outer Rim. You do not speak the language. Lyriel nodded beneath her hood. She was clutching the fabric tight under her chin. This place is vibrant. It is a pit, Jace corrected, but it is a pit with fuel. Come on. He dragged her toward a stall selling energy cells. The vendor was a four-armed insectoid who clicked his mandibles aggressively. 50 credits per cell, the vendor clicked. 50? Jace laughed, leaning on the counter. For these recycled half-charges, I will give you 20. 40, the vendor hissed. 25, and I do not report your unlicensed frequency modulator to the Port Authority. Jace countered smoothly. The vendor grumbled, his antennae twitching. 30, final offer. Deal. Jace tapped his credit chit against the scanner. He turned to Lyriel, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. That, Jace said, handing her a fuel cell, is called haggling. You never pay the sticker price. It is a dance. You insult the merchandise, they insult your mother, and you meet in the middle. I see, Lyriel said thoughtfully. It is like diplomatic treaty negotiations, but with more shouting. Exactly, Jace grinned. Why don't you try? We need supplies. He led her to a stall selling various liquids in glass jars. The vendor was a bored-looking human with a cybernetic eye. Lyriel stepped up to the counter. She picked up a bottle of amber liquid that shimmered in the neon light. The label was written in a slang dialect she couldn't read. I wish to purchase this, Lyriel announced, trying to sound authoritative but just sounding stiff. 100 credits, the vendor grunted, not looking up from his datapad. Lyriel looked at Jace. He nodded encouragingly. She turned back to the vendor. This is garbage, she declared, trying to mimic Jace's tone. It is swill. My mother would be ashamed to wash her feet in it. I will give you 10 credits. The vendor looked up, his cybernetic eye zooming in on her. He looked at the bottle, then at her. He started to laugh, a deep, rasping belly laugh. Lady, the vendor wheezed, that is spicy reactor sauce. It is a condiment. You put it on noodles. If you wash your feet in it, you will not have feet anymore. Lyriel froze. Oh, I will take 50, the vendor chuckled. Just for the entertainment. Lyriel paid, her face burning beneath the hood. She walked away quickly, clutching the bottle. You did good, Jace said, trying not to laugh. Assertive. I thought it was perfume, she muttered. It has a pleasant, radiant glow. It is made from peppers grown in radioactive soil, Jace explained. Open it up. Smell it. Lyriel uncorked the bottle. She took a delicate sniff. Her reaction was immediate. She recoiled, coughing, her eyes watering instantly. By the stars, it is chemical warfare. In her flailing, she accidentally squeezed the bottle. A spray of amber liquid shot out and misted onto her neck. Ah, Lyriel shrieked, dropping the bottle. It burns! Jace, I am dissolving! Jace caught her before she could claw at her own skin. He was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "It is just heat, princess. It is not acid. Here." He grabbed a cloth from a nearby table, ignoring the shout of the owner, and dabbed at her neck. "It feels like fire," she whimpered, tears streaming down her face. But then she looked at Jace. He was grinning, his eyes crinkled at the corners, looking younger and lighter than she had ever seen him. The absurdity of it hit her. She was the heir to the blood-sun throne, standing in a dirty market, smelling like radioactive hot sauce, being tended to by a scruffy mechanic. A giggle bubbled up in her throat, then another. Soon, she was laughing too, a bright, clear sound that cut through the market noise. They stood there, clutching each other for support, laughing until their ribs ached. "You smell like a spicy burrito," Jace gasped, wiping his eyes. "And you," Lyriel retorted, breathless, "are a terrible teacher." For a moment in that neon-lit alley, the weight of the prophecy and the death sentence lifted. They were just two people, young and alive. Then, the shadows moved. The crowd at the end of the walkway parted. 6 figures stepped into the light. They wore the matte black armor of the Imperial Shadow Guard, Vorath's personal executioners. "Target identified," a synthesized voice boomed. "Secure the asset. Terminate the collaborator." Jace's laughter died instantly. His hand snapped to his blaster. "Run!" He shoved Lyriel behind a crate of melons as plasma bolts sizzled through the air. The market erupted into chaos. Civilians screamed and scattered. "Saren," Jace yelled into his comms. "We are compromised. Sector 7. "On my way." Saren's voice came back, calm and cold. Jace popped up and fired 2 shots. One deflected off a Shadow Guard's armor. The other caught a drone, sending it spinning into a noodle stand. "They are flanking!" Lyriel shouted. She had drawn a sleek chrome pistol from beneath her cloak, a holdout weapon she had concealed. She fired with surprising accuracy, pinning down a trooper who was trying to circle them. "We need to get to the upper level," Jace yelled. They moved, leapfrogging from cover to cover. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of ozone. They reached a junction, only to find their path blocked. 3 more Shadow Guards stood there, heavy repeaters leveled, and behind them stood Saren. The massive bodyguard towered over the soldiers. She looked at Jace and Lyriel, trapped between the 2 groups. "Saren," Lyriel cried out, "help us!" The lead Shadow Guard lowered his weapon slightly. "Stand down, Praetorian. The Regent sends his regards. We will take it from here." Saren looked at the guard. Then she looked at Lyriel. Her mechanical eyes whirred. "The Regent," Saren rumbled, her voice like grinding tectonic plates. "Forgets the first oath." "What?" the guard asked. "The Praetorian Guard serves the blood," Saren said. "Not the crown, and certainly not a usurper." In a blur of motion, Saren raised her massive plasma cannon. But she didn't aim at Jace. She aimed at the Shadow Guards. Thum! The lead guard disintegrated in a flash of blue light. "For the resistance!" Saren roared. She charged, swinging the cannon like a club, smashing another soldier into the wall. "She is with us!" Jace yelled, grabbing Lyriel's arm. "Go! Go!" The firefight that followed was a blur of motion. Jace and Lyriel moved as one organism. When Jace stopped to reload, Lyriel covered him with suppressing fire. When Lyriel moved to open a locked blast door, Jace stood over her, shielding her with his body and his gun. They didn't need to speak. They had been synchronized in the ritual, and now they were synchronized in battle. Jace felt her intentions before she moved. She sensed his targets before he fired. It was a dance of violence, perfectly choreographed. They burst out onto a landing pad where a sleek, anti-gravity hover barge was idling. "Nox!" Jace screamed. "Hack it!" "Hacking!" Nox replied in his earpiece. Also, you have 12 pursuit drones incoming. The barge's engines roared to life. Jace vaulted into the pilot's seat. Lyriel jumped into the gunner's turret at the rear. "Punch it," she screamed. Jace slammed the throttle forward. The barge shot off the pad, scraping paint against the railing, and plummeted toward the lower levels of the city. The chase was insanity. Jace flew like a madman, weaving through the floating traffic, ducking under suspension bridges, and skimming the rooftops of the hab blocks. Behind them, the drones swarmed like angry hornets. "Targeting!" Lyriel shouted. The turret spun. Pew, pew, pew. 3 drones exploded in balls of fire. "Nice shooting, Tex!" Jace yelled over the wind. "I do not know who Tex is, but thank you," she yelled back. She was laughing again. Her hood had blown back, her silver hair whipping in the wind, her face flushed with adrenaline and reactor sauce and life. She looked wild. She looked free. Jace pulled a hard vertical climb, looping the barge over a massive holographic billboard advertising soap. The maneuver shook the remaining drones, causing 2 of them to collide. "Clear air!" Jace shouted. "We lost them!" He banked the barge away from the city lights, heading toward the dark, quiet side of the moon. They ditched the stolen barge in a canyon and hiked up to an abandoned observatory that sat on a high ridge. It was a relic from before the trade port was built, a silent dome of white stone. Inside, it was cool and quiet. The main telescope was gone, leaving a wide aperture open to the sky. Through it, the gas giant Zagara orbited, a swirling marble of violet and cream bands that filled the entire ceiling. Jace built a small fire in the center of the room using dead scrub wood. The flames cast dancing shadows against the curved walls. Lyriel sat by the fire, wrapping her cloak around herself. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a heavy, vibrating exhaustion. And something else. Jace sat down opposite her. He looked at her across the flames. She was smudged with soot, her hair tangled, smelling of smoke and spice. "You were incredible back there," Jace said softly. "I have never seen a royal shoot like that." "I had good teachers," she murmured, looking at the fire. "But I never felt like that before, like I was part of the storm, not just watching it." She looked up at him. Her eyes were dark, the irises swirling slowly. "We almost died," she said. "Almost," Jace agreed. "I do not want to die, Jace," she whispered. "Not yet. There is so much I have not done, so much I have not felt." Jace moved around the fire. He knelt beside her. "You are not going to die." "You cannot promise that," she said, her voice catching. "The soldiers, the curse, Vorath, it is all closing in." "Then we make the most of the time we have," Jace said. He reached out and touched her cheek. His thumb brushed against the soot stain on her skin. Lyriel leaned into his touch. Her breath hitched. The connection between them, the one forged in the ritual and tempered in the firefight, snapped tight. "Jace," she breathed. She turned her face and kissed the palm of his hand. Then she looked at him, and the invitation was absolute. "No more contracts," she whispered. "No more bargaining." "Just us," Jace said. He leaned in and kissed her. It was slow, deliberate, and devastatingly tender. Lyriel made a soft sound and pulled him closer. She lay back on the stone floor, pulling him down with her. The cloak fell open. Her skin was glowing. The bioluminescence was reacting to her arousal, pulsing in rhythmic waves of soft blue and violet light that illuminated the dark observatory. It was hypnotic. Jace paused, hovering over her, mesmerized by the light moving under her skin. He traced a line of light down her neck, over her collarbone. "You are shining," he whispered. "It is a reaction," she she gasped, her hands tangling in his hair. It happens when the heart rate elevates, when emotions are unchecked. Beautiful, Jace murmured. He kissed her again, deeper this time. He felt the cold silk of her skin, so different from human warmth, yet burning with an inner heat. He felt the symmetry of her body, the alien perfection of it, and the very human way she trembled under his touch. They explored each other with a reverence that bordered on worship. For Lyriel, it was the first time she had ever been touched without protocol, without permission forms, without the sterility of the court. Jace's hands were rough, calloused from work, but his touch was gentle. He made her feel solid. He made her feel real. For Jace, it was a surrender. He had spent so long believing he was broken, that he was unworthy of anything pure. But here, in the light of the gas giant and her glowing skin, he felt whole. There was no rush. They had all night. They moved together, a slow collision of worlds, finding a rhythm that belonged only to them. The fear of the future dissolved, leaving only the sensation of breath and light and the beating of two hearts in a quiet room at the edge of the universe. Later, the fire had burned down to embers. They lay tangled together under Jace's heavy flight jacket. Lyriel's head rested on his chest. Her glow had softened to a steady, warm hum. "Jace," she whispered into the darkness. If," she hesitated, "if the gene key does not work, or if Vorath wins and I die." "Don't," Jace warned, tightening his arm around her. "I need to say it," she insisted, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. "If I die, and there is a child, you will be alone. They will hunt you, you and the baby." "Let them come," Jace said, his eyes hard. "It is not about fighting," she said. "It is about loneliness. I do not want to leave you with a ghost. I do not want you to look at our child and only see what you lost." Jace reached up and cupped her face. "Lyriel, listen to me. I am not going to be a single father. We are going to fix the code. We are going to walk into that palace, kick your uncle off the throne, and you are going to raise that kid to be a pain in the ass. Just like you." Lyriel smiled, a sad, sweet expression. "Is that what you want? To raise a child in a palace?" "I don't care about the palace," Jace said. "I care about the people inside it. You said you wanted a legacy, right?" "Yes." "Legacy isn't a statue," Jace said. "It isn't a throne. It is the people you protect. It is the people who remember you were kind when you didn't have to be. That is what we are fighting for. Not the empire, but a life. A real life." Lyriel looked at him, and something shifted in her eyes. The fear receded, replaced by a steely clarity. "You are right," she said softly. "The throne, as it stands, it is a machine of control. If we survive this, Jace, I do not want to just rule. I want to change it. I want to break the wheel." "Now you are talking," Jace smiled. "But first, we have to survive tomorrow." "Yes," she agreed, settling back down against him. Tomorrow. Millions of miles away on the capital world of Ethelgard, the night was bright with artificial light. Regent Vorath stood on the balcony of the Imperial Spire, looking out at the city. A massive holographic projection filled the sky, visible to millions of citizens. It was the footage from the salvage hangar, but it had been doctored. It showed Lyriel handing over the deed to the hangar. It showed her looking desperate, erratic. Then, it cut to new footage, grainy images of the firefight in the market. It showed Lyriel shooting at Imperial peacekeepers. It showed her running with a human criminal. Traitor. The word burned in the sky in letters of red fire. Princess Lyriel Valdraken has betrayed the blood. She consorts with criminals. She attacks her own people. She has rejected her divinity. And next to the accusation, a clock appeared. It was a countdown. Time until succession. 364 days, 11 hours, 45 minutes. Vorath smiled as he watched the clock tick. "Let the people watch," he whispered to the wind. "Let them see her fall, and when the clock strikes 0, let them see who truly holds the power." He turned back to the shadowed room. "Prepare the fleet," Vorath ordered. "We know where they are going next." The holographic schematic of the Imperial data vault rotated slowly above the scarred mess table of the rusty bucket. It looked less like a building and more like a splinter of frozen light, a crystalline monolith floating 2,000 feet above the spires of the Capitol Palace. "It is beautiful," Lyriel murmured, tracing the air with a finger. "And it is impenetrable." "Nothing is impenetrable," Jace said, checking the charge on his mag-pulse pistol. "It is just a matter of how much noise you are willing to make." "We are breaking into a god's filing cabinet," Nox chimed in, his avatar flickering with nervous static. "The security protocols utilize fractal encryption. If I get the math wrong, the defensive grid will not just kill us, it will erase us from history, literally. There is a probability that our grandparents will cease to exist." "Nox, you are killing the mood," Jace muttered. "I am managing expectations," the AI retorted. They were 3 hours out from Ethelgard. The mood on the ship was tight, a bowstring pulled to its limit. They weren't just running anymore, they were attacking. In the cargo hold, a different kind of torture was taking place. "Again!" Saren barked. Jace groaned, straightening his spine until it cracked. "I am bowing. Saren, it is a bow. I bend at the waist. Gravity does the rest." "You look like a folding chair snapping shut," the massive bodyguard critiqued, circling him with critical glowing eyes. "You are entering the grand ball as a member of the peripheral nobility to create a distraction. You must move like water, not like rusty hydraulics." "I am a mechanic," Jace snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I don't flow, I ratchet. If you ratchet in front of the Regent, he will have you disintegrated before the appetizers are served." Saren warned. "Chin up, shoulders back, hands clasped behind the dorsal spine. Now, descend, smoothly. 1, 2, 3. Jace tried again, lowering himself with agonizing slowness. "Better," Saren grunted, which was high praise. "Now, try not to look at everyone as if you are estimating the scrap value of their jewelry." "No promises," Jace muttered. Later. In the quiet of the cockpit, Jace found Lyriel staring out at the hyperspace tunnel, the swirling blue vortex reflecting in her iridescent eyes. She was rubbing her palms together absent-mindedly. "Nervous?" Jace asked, sliding into the pilot's seat beside her. "Terrified," she admitted. "But it is not just the mission." She held out her hand. In the dim light of the cockpit, her palm was glowing. Not the usual cool violet bioluminescence, but a warmer golden hue that pulsed with a slow, double beat. "I feel strange," she whispered. "My center of gravity feels shifted, and there is a heat. Here." She pressed her hand to her lower stomach. Jace went very still. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers, afraid to touch. "Is it?" "The interface," Lyriel said softly. "The synchronization. It worked. Jace, I can feel the changes in my biochemistry. It is early, but the air is real." Jace placed his hand gently over hers on her stomach. He felt the warmth radiating through her flight suit. It wasn't just biology to him in that moment. It was a terrifying, fragile miracle. He thought of the fire, the war, the death he had seen, and here, under his hand, was the opposite of all that. "We are going to make it," Jace said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "I am going to get you into that palace. We are going to steal the truth, and then we are going to get out. You, me, and—" He nodded at her stomach. "The little stowaway." Lyriel smiled, but her eyes were wet. "You are a good man, Jace Aris, even if you bow like a folding chair." "Saren has a big mouth," Jace grumbled, leaning over to kiss her forehead. "Get ready, princess. It is showtime." The capital world of Ethelgard was blinding. The palace complex was a sprawling city of white stone and gold metal, lit by thousands of floating lumens. Above it all, the data vault hung in the sky like a judgmental diamond. The plan was a two-pronged assault, a pincer movement designed to shatter the regent's grip on the empire. Lyriel entered through the front doors. She wore a gown that defied description, a waterfall of midnight blue fabric woven with illegal nanofibers capable of disrupting local surveillance grids. It shimmered as she moved, creating a subtle visual distortion that made it hard for cameras to lock onto her face. Her hair was piled high, woven with diamonds, and the neural tiara on her brow blazed with royal authority. She swept into the grand hall, the massive doors groaning open to announce her. A hush fell over the room. Hundreds of nobles, dressed in silks and light weave, turned to stare. They had seen the broadcasts. They had seen the words "traitor" written in the sky. Yet, here she was, walking into the lion's den with her head held high. At the far end of the hall, seated on the levitating throne, Regent Vorath froze. His wineglass stopped halfway to his lips. Lyriel did not wait for an invitation. She crossed the floor, the crowd parting before her like the Red Sea. "Uncle," she said, her voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "I apologize for my lateness. I was detained by engine trouble." Vorath stood. He was a master of theater. He did not call for the guards. Instead, he opened his arms, a smile of shark-like warmth spreading across his face. "Lyriel," he proclaimed, stepping down from the dais. "My dear, troubled niece, we feared the madness had taken you completely." He embraced her. It looked affectionate to the crowd, but up close, his grip was iron. He squeezed her shoulders hard enough to bruise. "You have courage coming here," Vorath hissed in her ear, his voice a drop of poison. "But courage is just a pretty word for suicide. History will remember the dutiful Lyriel, not the defiant. You have until the clock strikes midnight to abdicate." Lyriel pulled back, her expression perfectly serene. She smoothed the front of her gown. "History is a fickle thing." "Uncle," she replied, loud enough for the nearby dukes to hear. "It has a habit of being rewritten when new information comes to light." It was a code phrase, a signal. Deep in the service tunnels beneath the palace, Jace heard it in his earpiece. "That is the signal," Jace whispered. "She is in position." Jace was not wearing silk. He was wearing the gray, grease-stained jumpsuit of a sanitation tech, Class 4. He carried a toolkit that concealed a high-yield plasma cutter and a portable hacking deck. "Copy that," Saren's voice rumbled. The bodyguard was squeezed into the tunnel beside him, looking ridiculous in a similar jumpsuit that was 3 sizes too small. "The lift to the vault is 20 meters ahead. Security is heavy." "Knox," Jace muttered. "Loop the cameras." "Looping," Knox replied. "You have a 10-second window before the visual buffer resets. Move." Jace and Saren sprinted. They reached the maintenance lift, a glass tube that shot directly up through the palace spire toward the floating vault. Jace jammed a decoder chip into the panel. The doors hissed open. "Going up," Jace said, checking his pistol. The lift ascended with stomach-churning speed. The palace fell away beneath them, replaced by the dizzying view of the city lights and the dark curve of the planet. Above them, the vault grew larger, a mountain of crystal filling the sky. Atmospheric breach in 3, 2, 1. Saren counted down. The lift docked with the underside of the floating monolith. Jace cut through the seal with his plasma torch, the blue flame sputtering in the thin air. They pulled themselves up into the vault. Inside, reality took a holiday. There was no floor. There was no ceiling. The interior of the vault was a chaotic, Escher-like landscape of floating platforms and crystalline walkways that twisted upside down and sideways. Gravity was subjective. Here, down was wherever you decided to stand. Rivers of data, actual streams of liquid light, flowed through the air, pulsing with the memories of the Empire. This is... Jace swallowed hard, trying to orient himself as he floated toward a sideways platform. Trippy. "Focus," Saren growled, engaging his mag boots to stick to a wall. "The prime terminal is at the center of the vortex. We have to cross the data stream." They navigated the labyrinth, jumping from platform to platform. Below them, or above them, endless archives spiraled into infinity. They reached the prime terminal, a pedestal of pure white light. Jace plugged Nox's portable drive into the port. "I am in," Nox announced, his voice echoing in the vast space. Parsing the archive, searching for Project Blood Sun failsafe. "Hurry," Jace said, watching the entrance. "They know we are here." "Found it," Nox said. "Downloading. By the code. It is extensive. Genetic manipulation logs dating back 300 years. Vorath didn't just engineer Lyriel's curse. He engineered the last 3 emperors. He has been culling the line to keep the regents in power." "We got him," Jace grinned. "Download it all, every dirty secret." "Wait," Nox said. The AI's voice faltered. There is a sub-file here, cross-referenced with the Imperial Naval Judiciary." "Ignore it," Jace said. "Just get the proof." "Jace," Nox said, sounding unusually human. "You need to see this." A holographic screen popped up in front of Jace. Subject: Heiress. Jace: rank: Lieutenant. Status: asset cultivation. Jace froze. He stared at the glowing text. Operation: Fallen Star. Objective: create isolated pilot asset for air protocol. Methodology: sabotage of flight controls on transport vessel. 449 ensure civilian casualties to induce psychological trauma and compliance. Outcome: subject disgraced, transferred to Sector 7 salvage. Financial debt engineered to ensure desperation. The world stopped spinning. The gravity in the vault didn't matter anymore because the ground had just vanished from under Jace's soul. He read the lines again. Sabotage of flight controls. Ensure civilian casualties. The fire. The ejection handle that wouldn't pull. The screams on the radio. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't his failure. It was a setup. They had killed 300 refugees just to break him. Just to put him in that hangar. Just so he would be desperate enough, lonely enough, and broken enough to say yes when a princess walked in with a contract. "Jace?" Saren asked, stepping closer. "We have the data. We must move." Jace didn't move. He felt cold, colder than space. He reached up and tapped his comms link. "Lyriel." "Jace?" Her voice came back, breathless. She was still in the ballroom. "Do you have it? Vorath is getting suspicious. I can't hold them much longer." "Did you know?" Jace asked. His voice was dead. "Know what?" Lyriel asked, confused. Jace, we do not have time. Did you know about the transport? Jace screamed. The sound echoed through the crystal vault, shattering the silence. Did you know they killed those people to get to me? Was I just a part of the shopping list? Jace, I do not understand. Lyriel sounded panicked. What are you talking about? Operation Fallen Star, Jace yelled, tears of rage hot in his eyes. My court-martial, the crash. It was all planned. Vorath, the priesthood. They broke me on purpose so I would be ready for you. Did you know? No, Lyriel gasped. Jace, I swear, I had no idea. I thought the match was random. I thought... You thought what? Jace laughed bitterly. That the stars aligned? You benefited from it. Lyriel, you got your heir. You got your loophole. And I got blood on my hands that will never wash off. Jace, please. She was crying now, her whisper harsh over the link. I was used too. I am a victim of this too. Yeah, Jace spat. Well, at least you got a throne out of it. At least you got to be a princess. I got to be the garbage man. Alert, Nox interrupted. Security countermeasures activated. We have company. The walls of the vault began to glow red. Portals opened in the ceiling, and Imperial drones poured out like a swarm of angry metal insects. Jace, Saren roared, firing his plasma cannon. We have to go. Jace stared at the screen. He wanted to burn it all down. He wanted to let the drones take him. Jace! Lyriel's voice cut through the static. I am sorry. I am so sorry, but if you do not broadcast that data, then they died for nothing. Do not let him win, Jace. Do not let him own their deaths too. The words hit him like a physical blow. Do not let him own their deaths. Jace looked at the file. He looked at Vorath's seal on the bottom. He grabbed the drive. Nox, Jace said, his voice ice cold. Send it to her. All of it. In the grand hall, the music had stopped. Vorath had signaled the guards. He knew something was wrong. Soldiers in ceremonial armor were closing in on Lyriel, forming a circle of steel. The charade is over, niece, Vorath sneered, stepping closer. Take her to the tower. We will announce her illness in the morning. Lyriel stood alone in the center of the room. She was trembling, but her head was high. She pressed her hand to her ear, listening to the silence on the comms. Then, a green light blinked on her neural tiara. Data received. She looked at Vorath. Her eyes were not violet anymore. They were burning white. You are right, uncle, Lyriel said, her voice shaking with rage. The charade is over. She reached up and touched the jewels on her tiara. She triggered the override command she and Nox had programmed, a command that hijacked the palace's atmospheric projection system. Look up, Lyriel screamed, pointing to the ceiling. The domed ceiling of the Great Hall, usually a fresco of the gods, dissolved into static. Then, it resolved into a massive high-definition image. It was the file, Project Blood Sun Failsafe. Then the next image, Operation Fallen Star. And then, a video log. Vorath himself 10 years younger, giving the order to sabotage Jace's transport. Acceptable collateral damage, the on-screen Vorath said. The crowd in the hall gasped. 1,000 glasses dropped to the floor. Outside, in the city, the sky itself turned into a screen. The entire population of Ethelgard looked up to see their regent condemning innocent civilians to death. They saw the medical charts proving the princess was not cursed by gods, but poisoned by men. Lies! Vorath shrieked. Turn it off! Kill her! The guards hesitated. They looked at the screen. They looked at Vorath. They looked at the princess, who stood glowing in the center of the room, her gown shimmering like armor. He murdered your children, Lyriel shouted to the room, to the guards, to the world. He engineered your wars. He poisoned your bloodline. There is no divinity here, only him. Chaos erupted. A duke drew his sword and lunged at a priest. A guard threw down his helmet. The illusion of order shattered in a single second. Vorath snarled like a cornered beast. He pulled a disruptor pistol from his robes and aimed it directly at Lyriel's chest. "If I cannot rule it," Vorath roared, "I will break it." He fired. Crack. But the bolt did not hit Lyriel. From the shattered skylight above him, a figure dropped. Jace slammed into the floor between Vorath and Lyriel, his mag boots cracking the marble. He had used a gravity chute from the vault, plunging 2,000 feet to get to her. He took the shot in his left arm. The armor plating absorbed most of it, but the impact spun him around. He didn't fall. He raised his own weapon, the heavy kinetic blaster he had carried through the war. "That is for the transport," Jace snarled. He fired. The shot took the pistol out of Vorath's hand, shattering the weapon and sending the regent stumbling back against the throne. Jace stood there, smoke rising from his armor, panting hard. He turned to look at Lyriel. She was staring at him, tears streaming down her face. She looked at his wounded arm, then at his eyes. "You came back," she whispered. "I am still mad," Jace said, his voice rough. "I am furious, and I am broken." He stepped closer, ignoring the chaos of the room, the fighting guards, the screaming nobles. "But you were right," Jace said. "If I left, he wins. And I am done letting him decide my life." He reached out with his good hand. "We finish this," Jace said. "Partner." Lyriel grabbed his hand. Her grip was strong, her palms glowing with that fierce golden light of the new life between them. "We finish this," she agreed. Outside, the city began to burn, not with war, but with revolution. The data vault above them pulsed, a lighthouse of truth in a sea of lies. The story of the Empire was over. The story of Jace and Lyriel was just beginning. The revolution was not quiet. It was a cacophony of screaming sirens, shattering glass, and the roar of thrusters as loyalist ships clashed with rebel frigates in the skies above Ethelgard. In the Great Hall, the illusion of civilization had evaporated. The nobility, realizing their divine regent was a murderer, had turned into a panicked mob. The Imperial Guards were fractured, half of them leveling weapons at Vorath, the other half forming a defensive ring around the throne, unsure which order to follow. Jace stood over Lyriel, his weapon raised, shielding her from the chaos. She was glowing with a fierce, terrifying light, the adrenaline of the revelation surging through her. "It is over, Uncle," Lyriel shouted, her voice cutting through the din. "The truth is out. Stand down." Vorath leaned against the high throne, clutching his wounded hand. His face was a mask of twisted hatred. He looked at the holographic sky, where his own voice was still condemning him on a loop, then back at Lyriel. "You think this is over?" Vorath spat, blood flecking his lips. "You think you can break the sky and just walk away? If I cannot hold the throne, Lyriel, then no one will." He reached into his bloodied robes and pulled out a small, black device. It was not a weapon, but a remote transponder. "The fail-safe," Vorath whispered. "I accelerated the timeline." He pressed the rune on the device. The effect was instant. Lyriel screamed. It was a sound that tore through Jace's heart, raw and agonizing. She collapsed, her knees hitting the marble floor with a sickening crack. "Lyriel!" Jace dropped his weapon and fell beside her. Her skin, which had been glowing with violet and gold bioluminescence, suddenly turned a dark, angry crimson. The light didn't just pulse, it spasmed. Jace watched in horror as black glyphs, Imperial command codes, began to burn their way up her arms, tracing the veins like poison. "It burns," Lyriel gasped, clutching her chest. "Jace, it feels like..." "Fire." He triggered the kill switch, Saren roared, dropping down from the chaotic melee to kneel beside them. The bodyguard ripped off her helmet, revealing a scarred face pale with fear. He initiated cellular collapse. We have minutes. Jace, maybe less. The gene key, Jace yelled, fumbling for the platinum cylinder in his belt. We use it now. Not here, Saren barked, grabbing Jace's shoulder. The rewriting process requires a stasis field and massive power. If you do it here, the energy surge will kill her. We need the sanctum. The sanctum? Jace asked, lifting Lyriel into his arms. She was burning up, her skin hot enough to blister his hands through his gloves. The old healing chamber, Saren explained, firing her plasma cannon one-handed to clear a path through the rioting nobles. Deep beneath the foundation. Run! They ran. Jace carried Lyriel through the service tunnels, his boots slamming against the metal grating. Her breathing was shallow, ragged gasps. The black glyphs were climbing her neck, reaching for the neural tiara, reaching for her brain. Stay with me, Jace pleaded, his voice cracking. Do not you dare quit on me now, princess. We just started the fun part. Jace, she whispered, her eyes unfocused, the irises swirling with chaotic gray. The child. Save the child. I am saving both of you, Jace growled. That is the deal, partners. Remember? They burst into the sanctum. It was a cavernous, spherical room built of ancient, singing stone, far below the technological veneer of the palace. In the center lay a slab of white marble, surrounded by dormant machinery that looked more like art than medical equipment. Place her there, Nox's voice echoed from Jace's comms. I am hacking the power grid, diverting all auxiliary power to the sanctum. I am locking the doors. You have 10 minutes before Vorath's loyalists cut through. Jace laid Lyriel on the slab. She was convulsing now. The countdown was visible on her skin, not numbers, but a shrinking bar of light on her wrist. He pulled out the gene key. It hummed violently in his hand, sensing the corrupted DNA nearby. He looked at the interface port on the slab. Jace, Saren said, her voice heavy. You know what this does. If you activate the key, it does not just remove the kill switch. It rewrites the foundational code of the Blood-Sun line. It removes the markers of divinity. It breaks the link to the throne's security systems. She will not be a High Royal anymore. She will just be distinct. She will be alive, Jace said. The Empire is built on the myth of that blood. Saren warned. If you do this, the myth dies. The religion dies. Chaos will follow. Jace looked at Lyriel. He looked at her stomach, where the new life was fragile and waiting. He looked at the pain etched into her beautiful face. The myth is a lie, Jace said, his voice steady. And I am done sacrificing people for lies. He jammed the gene key into the interface. Nox, initiate the rewrite. Initiating, Nox replied. Hold on. This is going to get loud. A beam of pure golden light erupted from the ceiling, slamming into the slab. It engulfed Lyriel. She arched her back and screamed, a sound that harmonized with the singing stone of the room. The golden light swirled around her, entering her pores, hunting the black glyphs of the curse. The room began to warp. The sheer amount of psychic and biological energy being released caused reality to flicker. Jace saw visions ripple through the air. He saw Lyriel as a child, lonely in a garden of glass flowers. He saw the moment they met in the hangar, the sparks flying from his torch. He saw a future that hadn't happened yet, a little girl with silver hair and Jace's stubborn chin, running through the corridors of a ship, laughing. It is too much, Saren yelled, shielding her eyes. Her synaptic pathways are fragmenting. She is losing herself. Lyriel, Jace shouted, grabbing her hand inside the storm of light. Focus on me. I am slipping. Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Jace, I do not know who I am. You are Lyriel, Jace shouted over the roar of the energy. You hate disposable chopsticks. You think haggling is like a treaty negotiation. You snorted during our wedding. He squeezed her hand, feeling the heat of the transformation. You are stubborn, Jace continued, tears streaming down his face. You are brave. You pretended not to like the spicy sauce, but you put it on your eggs this morning. That is who you are. Come back to me. The chaotic swirling of the light slowed. The visions coalesced. The golden light turned soft, warm, and steady. The screaming stopped. The machine powered down with a heavy thrum. Silence filled the sanctum. Jace stood over the slab, breathing hard. Lyriel lay still. The black glyphs were gone. Her skin was no longer glowing with the frantic, iridescent light of the royalty. Instead, it had a soft, steady warmth, a human warmth. Her eyes fluttered open. The nebula swirl was gone. Her eyes were a deep, clear violet, solid, real. Jace, she whispered. Her voice was weak, but it was hers. I am here, Jace choked out, collapsing against the slab. I am here. She lifted her hand. She looked at her wrist. The countdown was gone. It is quiet, she murmured. The humming, the connection to the throne. It is gone. I am silent. You are free, Jace corrected. Alert. Nox interrupted, his tone urgent. I hate to ruin the moment, but Vorath has fled the palace. He has boarded the flagship Worldbreaker. He is taking the remaining Loyalist fleet into orbit. He intends to glass the capital city from space to wipe out the rebellion. Lyriel sat up. She swayed, dizzy, but Jace caught her. He is going to burn it all, she said, her eyes hardening. He would rather rule a graveyard than a democracy. Then we stop him, Jace said. But we need a ship. Lyriel looked at Jace. A fierce smile touched her lips. We have a ship, she said. We have a whole fleet, and I believe, legally speaking, the Hangar belongs to you. The Hangar Authority was chaos, but it was organized chaos. Jace and Lyriel sprinted onto the flight deck. The 7th Fleet, the legendary ghost ships docked in deep storage, were powering up. Vix and Tallow had done their work. Engines that had been cold for 50 years were roaring with blue ion fire. All hands, Jace shouted into the fleet-wide comms. This is Commander Aris. We are launching immediately. Target is the Worldbreaker. Pattern Delta 9. Commander, Lyriel teased breathlessly as they ran up the ramp of the lead interceptor. I thought we were partners. I am flying, Jace grinned. You are shooting. Get in the chair. The Star Lance shot out of the hangar bay, leading a formation of 30 heavy cruisers. Space above Ethelgard was a light show of destruction. Vorath's flagship, the Worldbreaker, was a massive dreadnought, bristling with turbo lasers. It sat in high orbit, charging its primary bombardment cannon, a weapon capable of cracking the tectonic plates of the planet below. He is charging the main gun, Saren shouted from the tactical station behind them. 2 minutes to firing. Not if we get there first, Jace said. Hang on. Jace pushed the throttles to the stops. He didn't fly like an Imperial pilot. He flew like a salvage runner. He threw the massive interceptor into a spin, weaving through the defensive fire of Vorath's escort fighters. Calculated risk, Jace yelled, diving toward the flagship. Lyriel, target the bridge deflectors. Targeting! Lyriel's fingers flew across the weapons console. She wasn't using the neural interface anymore. She was using her hands, her eyes, her skill. Shield frequency is modulating. I need a kinetic impact to break the cycle. Nox, Jace shouted. Open a micro wormhole directly in front of us. Exit point inside their shield bubble. That is suicidal, Knox protested. The gravitational shear. Do it! The fabric of space tore open in front of them. Jace drove the ship into the swirling vortex. For a second, they were nowhere. Then they burst out of hyperspace less than a kilometer from the hull of the Worldbreaker, well inside its shields. Fire! Jace screamed. Lyriel unleashed a barrage of plasma torpedoes. They hammered the bridge tower of the flagship. Explosions blossomed in silence along the hull. Shields are down, Saren confirmed. Docking clamps engaged. Jace slammed the ship onto the hull of the dreadnought. Boarding party, let's go! They fought their way to the bridge. It was a brutal close-quarters brawl. Jace moved with the desperate speed of a man protecting his family. Lyriel fought with a cold, terrifying precision, her pistol taking down guards with efficient double taps. They burst onto the bridge. Regent Vorath stood by the captain's console. He looked insane. His robes were torn, his hair wild. He held a detonator in one hand. Stop! Vorath screamed. One step closer and I vent the atmosphere. We all die. Jace and Lyriel froze, weapons raised. It is over, Uncle, Lyriel said, stepping forward. The city knows. The fleet knows. You have nothing left. I have fear, Vorath spat. The people need fear. Lyriel, without it, they are animals. Look at them rioting. Order requires a strong hand. It requires a god. Fear breeds monsters, Lyriel countered, her voice calm. It bred you. And what did hope breed? Vorath sneered. A mechanic and a mutant? He lunged. It was a feint. As Lyriel fired, Vorath activated a personal force shield that deflected the bolt. He grabbed Jace, hauling him in front of his body, pressing a disruptor pistol to Jace's temple. Drop it! Vorath screamed at Lyriel. Drop the gun or the father of your bastard dies. Jace struggled, but Vorath's mechanical grip was steel. Lyriel, shoot him! Jace yelled. Take the shot. No. Lyriel froze. Her gun wavered. Do it, Jace urged, his eyes locking with hers. If he fires that main gun, millions die. My life is not worth that. Do what is right. Lyriel looked at Jace. She saw the love in his eyes and the absolute willingness to die for her and the world below. She lowered her gun. Vorath laughed. Weakness. Love is always the fatal flaw. You are wrong, Lyriel whispered. Love is the connection. She closed her eyes. She didn't reach for a weapon. She reached out with her mind. The gene key had removed the royal limiters, the safeguards that prevented the royals from accessing the deep code of the ancient ships. She was no longer just a user. She was an administrator. She pushed her consciousness into the Worldbreaker's mainframe. System override, she thought. Authorization, Lyriel Prime. The ship fought her. It didn't recognize her new genetic signature. I am not the queen, she told the machine. I am the architect. She forced her will into the circuits. She didn't command with codes. She commanded with pure biological authority. The lights on the bridge turned from red to gold. What? Vorath gasped, looking at the consoles. What are you doing? System, Lyriel said aloud, her voice echoing with the ship's speakers. Identify threat command. Threat identified. Regent Vorath. The ship's computer boomed. Protective Protocol Alpha, Lyriel ordered. Isolate. Gravity on the bridge shifted instantly. Vorath was slammed upward, pinned against the ceiling by a localized gravity well. The pistol flew from his hand. Jace dropped to the deck, gasping for air. Stasis, Lyriel commanded. A beam of blue light encased Vorath. He froze, trapped in a timeless bubble, his face a mask of eternal rage. The main gun powered down. The hum of the drive died. Jace scrambled up and ran to Lyriel. She swayed, exhausted by the mental effort. "You hacked the dreadnought with your brain?" Jace asked, holding her up. "I asked it nicely," she murmured, leaning her head on his shoulder. It seemed to prefer a polite request over being yelled at. The broadcast went out to every screen in the Empire. Lyriel stood on the bridge of the Worldbreaker, Jace by her side. She wore no crown. Her flight suit was scorched, her face smudged with soot. "Citizens of Ethelgard," she began. She didn't use the royal we. "I am Lyriel. I am not a god. I am a woman who was sick and who was saved." She looked at the camera, her gaze unflinching. "For 1,000 years, we have been told that some blood is worth more than others. We were told that the throne protects us, but the throne was a cage. Today, we broke the bars." She reached out and took Jace's hand. The camera zoomed out to show them standing together, the princess and the mechanic. "There will be no more engineered bloodlines," she declared. "There will be no more kill switches. The priesthood is disbanded, that from this day forward the Empire is a commonwealth, and leadership will be earned, not inherited." She placed a hand on her stomach. "This child," she said softly, "will not be an heir to a throne. They will be a citizen of a new world, a world where a pilot from a salvage yard and a daughter of the palace can build a life, a world where we choose our own future." Jace squeezed her hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The look on his face, proud, defiant, and hopelessly in love, said it all. 6 months later. Hangar Bay 4 was unrecognizable. The leaking coolant pipes were gone. The gloom was replaced by soft ambient lighting that mimicked a planetary dawn. Skylights had been cut into the upper hull, showing the stars wheeling overhead. The bay was full. Human freighters docked next to sleek imperial yachts. Alien traders argued cheerfully with Ethelgardian mechanics. It was a hub of noise, life, and cooperation. In the center of the bay, a small, heavily modified shuttle sat on the lift. Lyriel was under the engine cowling, a wrench in her hand. Her belly was round now, pressing against her maternity flight suit. She had grease on her nose. "You are tightening the flow regulator too much." Jace's voice came from the cockpit ladder. "You are going to choke the intake." "I am adjusting for torque," Lyriel countered, wiping her forehead. "If we are going to use this for the medical relief mission to the Rim, it needs to handle atmospheric turbulence." Jace jumped down from the wing. He walked over to her, taking the wrench from her hand and tossing it onto the bench. "You," he said, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, "are supposed to be resting. The doctor said no heavy lifting. The wrench weighs 1/2 kilo, Jace." She laughed, leaning back against him. "I am pregnant, not broken." "Tell that to the kid," Jace said, resting his hands on her stomach. "He has been kicking all morning, probably trying to fix the womb from the inside." "She," Lyriel corrected. "I have a feeling it is a she." "If it is a girl, we are in trouble," Jace groaned. "2 of you? I will never win an argument again." "You never win arguments now," she pointed out. "True." They stood there for a moment, watching the bustle of the hangar. A group of refugees were boarding a transport bound for a new colony, guided by Saren, who had surprisingly taken to managing the logistics with terrifying efficiency. "We did it," Jace said softly. "We actually pulled it off." "It is good work," Lyriel agreed. "Better than ruling." "Hey," Jace said, turning her to face him. "Do you remember the deal? The original one?" Lyriel smiled. The memories of that first day, the fear, the desperation, the cold transaction, felt like a lifetime ago. "I remember," she said. 1 year left. Give me an Heir. Get the Hangar. She looked around the vast, beautiful, chaotic space they had built. She looked at the ships that were saving lives, not taking them. She looked at Jace, the man who had pulled her out of the fire and taught her how to be real. She reached up and adjusted his collar, her fingers lingering on his neck. "I have a new deal," she whispered, her eyes shining with mischief and deep, abiding love. "Oh yeah?" Jace raised an eyebrow. "What are the terms?" Lyriel leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. "I have all the time I need," she said softly, "and the Hangar is yours." "Ours?" She pulled back to look him in the eye. "Not as a trade," she finished, "but as a home." Jace smiled, the slow, easy smile of a man who had finally stopped running. "Deal," he said. He kissed her under the soft blue lights of the Hangar, surrounded by the noise of engines and the laughter of free people, as the stars wheeled endlessly overhead, promising a future that was wide open and entirely their own.